ahead and if you could please give me your name and why you're here.
Yes, hi, my name is Michael Gough. I am a voice actor. That's how I make my living. I live down in Los Angeles. I've done a lot of work for Disney, cartoons, DreamWorks, Warner Brothers, Cartoon Network, Nickelodeon, and a lot of video games. My grandfather was Bill Hardiman, one of the original founders of Aero Development, and I'm very thrilled and excited and passionate to be talking about him and Aero. When my younger cousin Sabina and I were invited out to be the first people to ride Pirates of the Caribbean, we were the first guinea pigs. Yeah, I remember, I'm trying to remember, I seem to have some inkling that we were even taken out of school. I don't remember if it was a weekday, and it's probably not something my mom would have been thrilled about, but she was there, and my grandfather obviously, and all the other guys from Aero. And it was, you know, they told us, okay, it's a new ride, it's going to be called Pirates of the Caribbean, this is for Disneyland, and we need somebody who wants to go on this ride, and we're going to see how this thing works. So we're like, okay, that'll be us. So it was just the two of us, you know, going down and around, and I always remember that. And of course, I like to mention it whenever I can. You know, hey, you know, it's the first person to ride Pirates of the Caribbean. Like I say, he was, you know, and I have other recollections and things were even recently written down by my mom about him, but he was, it was always like, I think we can figure this out if there's a problem here, you know, in mechanical ways or fixing things or creating something. He built me a go-kart pretty much out of parts that may have had nothing to do with a go-kart. It did have a lawnmower engine, and I remember, because my grandparents didn't live far, they were about 10 minutes away from us, that I would go over there, and the times that I was allowed into the garage, because the garage was like kind of this sanctum, you know, it was like this cluttered wonderland of machinery, and you could tell there were like projects in the works in every kind of nook and cranny. But I watched him build it, you know, here and there, and I was fascinated. One, because I'm not I'm not that handy. So it was something to me that was like, wow, how do you do that? And just watching him operate all the, you know, the different machines and putting things together. I remember he built a hydraulic camper on the back of his pickup truck so that you could drive it around and it would be pretty flat, and then when you got to wherever you were going, push the button and the whole back of it would go, and it would be a camper all of a sudden that you could go inside and stand up in, and it had, you know, the things you would need inside. So, you know, I mean, just as a little kid growing up and getting to see him fairly regularly because they lived close, it was a whole fascinating world to me of things being built and industry and you know, creation and mechanics and all of that. He taught me how to drive in his Model A. So it was like, you know, the stick was about this tall, and it was. So yeah, I mean, those are most of the kind of, you know, real fond recollections I have. Now I do remember that he, at the end of a hard day, he came in, sat in his recliner, and would often eat while watching Perry Mason. It was like Perry Mason, that was like the #1 thing, and he would have like a TV tray. You know, and he'd be kind of, you know, sometimes kind of still greasy and whatever, but Yeah. Is that when he first started working at Hendy Iron Works, right? That's the name of the company. It was during World War II. He was a little bit too old to be in the first wave of draftees, and he was married and he had a couple of small kids. So he was a fairly safe risk to hire. But people were going around looking for the jobs. And he ended up, applying at Hendy. And one of the things that they asked him right off the bat was, do you know how to operate this particular kind of giant lathe? And of course he said, sure. Oh yeah, I know how to do that. And when in fact he didn't know anything about it, had never even seen one. But he had like a week before he had to start the job. And in what my mom wrote, he hit the library for a week. And one of the things he had learned when he was at UC Berkeley was how to learn. He learned how to learn. So he got himself up to speed, figured it out, and then went to work at Hendy. And I kind of like to think that that is a spirit that really informed the creation of aero development. It's like, well, this seems like okay, we'll figure this out. I'm not even sure where the original spark came from to build rides, but obviously it was something they enjoyed and got really passionate about, and that was the whole spirit of the company, really. And even when Walt Disney got involved later, and there was an article from the Sunnyvale Standard, which has long since been defunct, but this was from 1955, and it was an article about aero development, and they quoted my grandfather, Bill, as he was the project manager for this, and they talked about Walt coming to them and discussing kind of what he wanted. Sometimes there were sketches provided, and this was like in the early beginnings of the Teacups and Casey Jr. and all the early rides that they built. And other times Walt would just kind of give them his thoughts, and then they had to get cracking and come up with things. And I think, I like to think that his spirit was a common theme throughout, the early days of aero. That okay, we can figure this out. We know what to do. We don't have much time, but we'll get it done.
Why was aero so successful, in your opinion?
Well, part of it certainly was kind of being at the right place at the right time. When Walt got wind of them, that was pretty, that was fortune smiling on you. But obviously they knew what they were doing, and maybe they created their own niche, at least around here. I don't think anybody else was doing what they were doing. And it started with little local rides, local amusement parks, Playland. They discovered what it was they wanted to do, and they really got after it and did it on a local scale, and then it caught the attention of people, and Walt got involved, and of course none of it would have worked if they hadn't been really good at what they were doing and able to create things that were really well put together and had this element of fun and fantasy. And so yeah, it's hard to, I guess, put your finger on why they were successful, but it all came from that original drive that I think caused them to form the company in the first place. And quality was certainly one of the mandates, right? We've got to do this right if we're going to do it, and they did. It's kind of unbelievable, like I mentioned earlier, I'm grateful, I'm knocking wood that I've gotten to do what I do for a living, and just being able to work for Disney and, like a bunch of Disney cartoons and things, but also having had my voice be a part of a couple of rides and things at the parks. The Winnie the Pooh ride, which is currently still there. There are a couple of things. The new Enchanted Tiki Room, which never came to Disneyland, was at Disney World, and a couple of the other parks around the world, I believe. And also the Light Magic Parade at Disneyland, which sort of took over for the Main Street Electrical Parade for a while, and then kind of fell out of favor, and they sort of as far as I can remember, they kind of reimagined the Electrical Light Parade and brought that back. But just knowing that, my grandfather had that early connection with Disney and Disneyland, and now through, years of, I didn't even know what I was going to do for a while. I'm in college, I was like, oh, okay, and I sort of discovered the acting thing, and then got into the voice acting thing specifically, and having done a bunch of stuff for Disney, it's kind of unbelievable to me, and I'm like really kind of excited and proud about it, And I tend to gush when I think back and talk about my grandfather, because I just think it's such a cool thing that he had that connection with Disney, and there's some sort of a through line, yeah. And just going through some of the material that we've looked at that my mom had from the original Arrow stuff, their brochures and their promotional stuff, and his original business card, and some of the old photos of the stuff that they were working on. It's yeah, it really gets me. I'm like really excited and happy and thankful about it. To me, the legacy has something to do with the celebration of the kind of childlike fantasy of rides in general. Who doesn't love to go on a ride of some kind when you're a kid? Now, maybe you're scared of big scary rides, but fun rides, they implant memories that last forever, and it's a real gift, I think. Just the whole amusement park carnival ride thing, to me, it's like something real magical. And that's one of the big components of Arrow's legacy to me, is that they were involved in something that creates all these indelible memories, starting at a real early age. Obviously, they must have had some of their own to want to create more of them. I'm sure they all went on some kind of rides when they were young, and the fact that they were all builders and creators and figured out that, hey, we can make these, we can build these, we can put them out there, carousels, little airplanes, trains, boats, cars, and start creating those kinds of magical memories, and then watching it grow. And it's like, well, obviously, hey, it's becoming something profitable too, but they wouldn't have done it unless they loved it. And that's, to me, that's kind of the big thing of the legacy, of Arrow Development's legacy, is that they loved what they were doing, They did it really well, and what they put out there grew into something I'm sure they had no idea that it would, and who knows how many countless experiences and memories and things were created out of what they built.